I want to come along with explaining a little bit about the potencies of the Lord and how it is impacting on our lives. There's something we need to look at here that I'd like to bring out from a scientific point of view. And that is, we have a limited spectrum of hearing, of seeing, sensing. And just like this radio station, there is a frequency specifically for this station. And if you tune into that right frequency, you hear us. And you move along the dial to a different frequency, you hear someone else. Similarly, we in the human form of life and most of the living entities in the compatible spectrum here on the planet, we hear at 20 to 20,000 hertz. That's our hearing range. We all know that there's sounds that are higher that only dogs can hear. There's other sounds that are lower that only whales can hear. So we know that there is a light spectrum, there is a sound spectrum, there is an electromagnetic spectrum, limitations on our essential perception and capabilities in this particular sphere of life, in this particular material aspect. The spectrum is quite limited, actually, but it's adequate. But we have to recognize that the rest of the spectrum is there. And that on those different spectrums, there's somebody else. Just like if you move off of this radio station, you move along the dial, there's somebody else. Similarly, if you move outside of this spectrum of vibration that we're able to hear and see, etc., there's other living entities. We may or may not be able to see them. They may be in what's called the fourth dimension. The ninth dimension, for all we know. But we do know that there is sound and light and spectrum above and below our capacity. And we even know there's stuff above and below that, and above and below that. So we have to recognize then that there are other perceived realities that are in different spectrums. It isn't that it's void. It's not compatible with us. Just like right here, we're not hearing any interference. We're just doing this station. But that doesn't mean that the other stations aren't out there working, broadcasting, doing all the things they do. We have the knowledge because we can move along. We have the receiver and we can tune in to different frequencies and find different stations. But in our material bodies, we don't have a broad spectrum receiver. We can only pick up some spectrums. Just like recently, let's say, in the last 15 years, 20 years, they've developed cameras that you can actually take pictures of ghosts. They've developed sound systems that you can actually hear subtle plane beings. So they've brought out equipment that is tuned to outside of our spectrum. And yet it modifies it in such a way that we can pick up on what's going on there. Now, according to the Vedic literature, the entire universe, the topmost planet to the lowest planet, and all of them in between in 14 planetary systems, is the way it's described in Vedic literature, all of the planets have living entities just like this one. Now, we have a huge number, very congested almost, living entities everywhere. And the same is true on all of the planets in this universe. No planet is vacant. You might think so because what they're doing is outside of your perception range, as we're just discussing. But it doesn't mean that they're not there. And similarly, taking this one step further, the Lord is obviously on another vibration level too. Now, the way the Vedic literature describes it is the Lord is on all the vibration levels. We're only on a band. But the Lord is on all of the bands. Whether it is perceivable by animals or perceivable by other types of beings or subtle-bodied beings or intellectual-based beings, we don't know. So you can see how it's possible for the Lord to be fully there, fully active, fully involved in many, many levels of realities and not be perceived by us. So then you can understand that it isn't up to you to say, all right, Lord, God, show me. show yourself. Come on, step forward. I want to see God. You show me God or I don't believe. Well, what is your ability to see God? Your ability is to see in this band. But the Lord's ability is to be present in all bands. And we don't really know the limitation of how far this bandwidth goes. So this concept of the arrogant person saying, you have to show me God or I won't believe in him, is foolishness. It's not even scientifically backed. It's just a mental concoction. It has no relevance to the real question here, and that is, how does one see the Lord? If he wants to see the Lord, how does he go about it? The Vedic literature has very clearly described this issue. Because it's not something that's silly, and there is the natural inclination to want to have a more personal relationship, to want to have dynamic exchange with the Lord on the part of you and I as living entities. So this has been addressed in the Vedic literature significantly. And as I've mentioned before in our program, Srila Prabhupada says, he's quoting his spiritual master, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, that you should not act in such a way that you can see God. You can't go changing your vision or putting on some glasses or making the sound louder or smaller or looking from this angle or that angle. You can't take some silly adjustment and be able to see God. The way you see the Lord is when he chooses. The Lord is absolute and not dependent on anyone. If he wants to see you or you to see him, then it will happen. There is no demand. We cannot make demand. How can we demand one living, tiny little living entity of billions of living entities? What is our claim to the right to see the Lord? As I'm saying, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta said, you should act in such a way that the Lord sees you. That means you need to understand what pleases Krishna and how to act such that Krishna says, yes, I will let myself be seen. I will reveal myself to this person because they're sincerely doing the right things. So this is a clarification of who the responsibility rests with. Because we are the subordinate living entities, and so our responsibility is to act in such a way that we're not only doing good, but we're acting in such a way that the Lord has significant approval. Well, then you're going to have to know more about the Lord's perspective such that you know what is right and what is wrong. Now, in the Bhagavad Gita, it describes that one should offer his food to the Lord such as to purify and free himself from the karmic reaction of killing even the vegetables. So you need to know the method, and you need to know what foods the Lord will accept and won't. He says clearly in the Bhagavad Gita, he will not accept any type of animal products. He will accept milk because it is a byproduct from the cow for development of brain tissue in humans and other species. He designed it for advancing the consciousness of the humans. And the animal is not killed. It's not part of the body. It's a special miracle food. And more is produced than the calf can drink. And this is a clue that it's designed for humans to consume. And we have animal rights groups that are misguided. And they try to say that even milk is bad. It's not bad. It's designed for us. Now, there's different ways, good and bad ways, of harvesting that milk. And there's inhumane things that happen there, and that's another subject. But the product is intended for our upliftment as a benefit to the consciousness. But other animal products of any type are not allowed. The Lord does not live or subsist or want any offerings of animal tissue, eggs included. We've learned this from the Vedic literature. And similarly, there's a lot more information that can be learned from the Vedic literature about what is the Lord's desired plan, perspective. What does he want for us, and what does he want from us? And what is that relationship and the interaction of activities and thoughts and support? Well, this is all described in detail in the Bhagavad Gita as it is. This book is a written record of the Lord's personal instructions, speaking personally, directly, for the betterment of you and me and every other living entity. It's universally applied to all living entities. It's not open for interpretation. It's not something you can challenge and try to say, well, this isn't right, or I don't agree with that sentence, or yada, yada. That's not what it's about. It's for you to read it and understand the information transferred in there, and then consider it seriously. And you can even investigate. You can even experience some of the influences, laws of action and reaction, many other things that are delineated in the Bhagavad Gita. You can look at society. You can look at the manifestation. You can look at so many things from a far better perspective than you could previously. Because the Vedic knowledge is a protected knowledge that has not been altered, has not deviated in any way. It's provided clearly, specifically for the living entities and material bodies in the material world who are wondering how they can conquer over the laws of nature, how they can purify their consciousness, how they can engage in activities that are solely beneficial, and how they can learn about the will and the wishes of the Lord. Now, this is not given in most of the other religions on the planet, but it is given specifically in the Bhagavad Gita as it is. It is a very important and very powerful and very amazingly respected book because it throws out all interpretation, adulteration, imagination, etc. that is kicked out. It's simply a written record of the Lord's speaking, of instructions that intended to help you and me come to realization. So this is a very strong opportunity by the Vedic literature in the form of Bhagavad Gita as it is. And each living entity has the opportunity, if he's in the human form, to read it. Nowadays, it's hardly the fashion to finish a book. Everybody is so impatient and poor concentration and focus, they'll read a bit, skip ahead, and read some more, and skip ahead, and read some more, and run to the last page and see how it ends. This is fine for magazines, but this is not useful for spiritual realization and the purification of your consciousness. The Bhagavad Gita, you owe it to the book to simply start at the beginning and read to the end. Then you can make up your mind, because you have the whole thing in perspective. Then, all right, your opinion has merit. Your interpretation, understanding, and perspective of the whole treaty has merit. But if you skip along and you treat it like a magazine, you're not going to get much from it. Because this is serious subject matter. This is confidential knowledge. This is knowledge of realization. This is knowledge of the cycle of birth and death. This is knowledge of the material world and the spiritual world. This is knowledge of the Lord, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, and his personal associates, those purified beings who have conquered over all of the limitations that you and I struggle with on a daily basis. This struggle for existence is not our normal condition. It's called contamined condition. And the parallels and differences, etc., are all clearly laid out in Bhagavad Gita. They give you knowledge and understanding and perspective on your eternal life platform. We are eternal living entities, as we've discussed many times. We are eternal living entities in temporary material bodies. No material body will last forever. Impossible. The stuff it's made out of deteriorates. That's all. So nobody's going to live forever in their material body. It isn't possible. But we are eternal living entities, and to kill a living entity is impossible. You can only kill the temporary material body, but you cannot kill a living entity. Because we are, by constitution, eternal. So this knowledge, this perspective, is the prerequisite for reading Bhagavad Gita. And in the second chapter, right in the beginning of the book, this is clearly delineated with many, many factual perspectives, points of view, to give you a clear understanding of your eternal nature and of your temporary embodiment. And then the book goes on and explains to you how it's all working, why it's working, how the functions are interacting and impacting upon you and everyone else. And this is vital information. It moves further into explaining the Lord and his expansions and incarnations, his reaching into every species of life, trying to encourage the living entities to higher levels, to open consciousness. All of this is given, plus much more I can't cover in this short time. And it's intended for the upliftment and realization and awareness of all the living entities here in the material world. So this great opportunity should be taken and used responsibly because it gives you insights, it gives you enlightenment, and you can learn the Lord's perspective. And with that perspective, you can then dovetail your actions with the wishes of the Lord. And this is the path to perfection. It's called devotional. It's called bhakti yoga, the service and devotion. Bhakti. And this perspective opens the door of realization, purifies the consciousness, and enlightens you. Then you're able to use your God-given abilities, to use your independent free will, to make use of your natural inclination and tendencies, and you're able to act in such a way that the result is of the highest possible caliber. This is how you get to spiritual life. And this is how you come to the platform that the Lord sees you. From whatever platform of vibration rate he may be on, all of them actually, to the vibration rate that you are capable of perceiving, the Lord can reach you. But it isn't true that you can necessarily reach to the Lord. But by his witnessing your sincerity and following the instructions of the spiritual master, you become qualified for his mercy. He's looking for the attitude, the consciousness, the merciful perspective of life as opposed to the greedy selfishness. And when he sees that developing in your heart and he sees your desires changing to more and more selfless and your consciousness raising to more and more helpful, he becomes satisfied and he'll reveal himself to you in due course of time. In previous ages, it was meditation, and it was worship, and it was yoga, and a variety of other things in previous ages. But in this age, it's the chanting of the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, and it's reading of the Bhagavad Gita as it is. These two processes, side by side, guarantee one's success, guarantee you liberation from the cycle of birth and death. That is how potent it is. That is how important it is to a living entity struggling with material life in this material world. So we are prescribing on our program that you read the Vedic knowledge. You read Bhagavad Gita as it is. And you can become purified. You can change your life. And you can come to the platform where you know that you're executing activities that are satisfactory to the Lord and beneficial to everyone else. And if the Lord is pleased with you, you get engaged in more transcendental activities and you stop the cycle of karma and you come to the point you can see the Lord face to face every day, everywhere you go. This is not some wishful thinking. This has been done by millions and billions of other living entities previously by following the prescribed process. You need to hear the Bhagavad Gita to understand what the Lord wants and how it is to be done. And recognize he's inaugurated this movement of chanting of the holy name and reading of the Bhagavad Gita as the two methods that guarantee you purification, guarantee you to see your path back home.